I assume, but I guess I shouldn't, that everyone knows that we have 4 candidates. That as a school board, we employed the Alabama Association of School Boards to bring us the top 4 candidates that applied through them. We actually began this morning very early with Dr. Shaw, and we'll spend the next 3 days with 3 other candidates. Our school board has together formulated 12 questions that we will divide up and ask to all candidates. Of those 12 questions, there may be some spin-offs to get more clarification. We appreciate the concern just by showing up. Ms. Kirkland said a while ago, maybe instead of having a moment of silence, we just would encourage y'all to pray for us that wisdom will prevail. We have 4 really good candidates. Each of them could lead this system, but we want to make sure we have the perfect fit for Florence City Schools. Tonight we're going to start with Dr. Jimmy Shaw. He's in the hot box over there. Made sure he had lots of water. And we're going to move through our questions in just a moment. But before we do, Dr. Shaw, would you take a couple of minutes and just tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to this point today?
My journey here was a little non-traditional. I grew up in this city that is not non-traditional. I had a great experience in the school system here. After I finished high school here, I decided to go to college like most kids do, but I took a detour because of a job. And I worked 8 years at TJ's Manufacturers as a dye tub operator. During that 8-year time, I was motivated to go back to college and get my degree. And so at night and on weekends, I worked and went to school in the daytime, which led me to a teaching job at Bradshaw High School. From there, my lifelong goal was to live out my educational life as a teacher and a coach. I love the classroom. I love the direct touch with students. But somewhere along the line, somebody kind of detoured me just a little bit to take an administrative job as an assistant principal for him. And that job catapulted me here because I figured out at that point that I could pour into kids in any position in the school system. So from there, I've been an assistant principal, I've been a federal programs director, I've been the director of assessment and instruction, and currently I sit as the assistant superintendent of Florence City Schools. So if I were to tell you that it has been the human guide for me to be in this seat, I would not be telling you the truth, but I have truly been guided to this spot tonight.
Thank you. We're going to start our 12 questions, and I get to be first.
All right.
And for those in the audience, they did have a copy of these questions before they arrived tonight. All candidates had them last Thursday.
Yes.
And there may be a couple of surprises. You never know. But the 12 basic questions all have those in their hands. Number 1, what are the 3 most important roles of the superintendent?
So when I look at this question, I initially thought about the 3 pillars that we learned in Superintendent's Academy. We learned about finance, we learned about law, and we learned about curriculum academics. But the reality of it is that anybody that's sitting in this seat, that's kind of the base. That's where, we should have some knowledge. To me, though, the real 3 important roles of a superintendent beyond that base are vision caster, lead servant, and lead learner. So for me, for a vision caster, you have to have the ability as a leader to have the pulse on your people and know what your people want, but you should also have a vision of greatness yourself for a school district and for people. And you should be able to cast that vision so clearly and so vividly that they can see it as a picture and they almost see it and touch it as a destination. As a lead servant, once you've cast a great vision like that, then you should be able to help equip your people. As a leader, it's not about being out front all the time. A lot of times it is about the people in the trenches with you, the teachers, the principals, the administrators, the support personnel. They make vision happen. And so our job as a leader is to always try to equip them to get you there. If you have a great vision, no one person can get any organization to a place. But it takes a team to do it, and the leader's job is to be the lead servant serving those people. And finally, the lead learner. Education as a whole is about learning. And John Maxwell talks about this thing, the law of the lid, that basically people very often cannot lead or grow past the level that the leader of an organization has reached. So if we're truly going to be a learning organization and a learning university, then my job is to be the absolute lead learner. That means that my appetite for learning and my appetite for improving, to pour into our teachers so they can pour into their kids, has to be unmatched by the district. I have to constantly look for ways to grow and learn myself so we can help and grow our people.
Thank you.
What 3 words describe your leadership style? Now, this question has some other facets too, but what 3 words describe your leadership style?
Okay. I'm a questioner first. And by questioner, I mean this. I have followed people in the past that any idea that you had was an automatic no and an automatic got shot. Mm-hmm. So I've learned that you don't always have all the answers. As a matter of fact, on the team, you probably have a finite amount of the answers. And that's the purpose of having a team around you. And so I've learned to ask questions. I want to know when I'm leading a group of people what they think, and now more important than that, why do they think that? I feel like before we roll an idea out to the public, we really should shoot holes in, that's our terminology in our office, we shoot holes in ideas to see if they will stand the test of criticism and stand the test of really working or not. If it can't make it out of our office, then it really shouldn't make it out. So that's one of the ways I lead. The other way I lead is a pace setter. So in a race, most often your pace setter is out front, and they are absolutely setting the pace for the field. And as a leader, sometimes you should be just that. You should be out front setting the pace. But somewhere along that race, that pace setter car drops to the back. And as a leader, sometimes you have to drop to the back of the pack. You have to make sure that not only have you led a group to get to a place, but once that group is going that way, you need to slide to the back sometime and see if you have people struggling, if they're having hard times, and have a conversation with them back there to see what they're doing. And sometimes you're in the thick of the things with your people. Once the vision is cast and the group is rolling in a direction, you really need to be in there hand in hand with your people, because in order to get to a great vision or a great dream, it takes more than one person, and we all have a role to play. And your role is not always to be out front. You know, sometimes your role is to be in there, nose to the grindstone with your people.
And I think you gave examples.
I did.
Thank you. What single word would your colleagues use to describe you and your supervisory skills? What single word?
So I wrote a dissertation on servant leadership. I studied it for 5 years. But the one word I would actually use to describe me is determined. I do think I'm a servant, but more than a servant, I'm determined. I am one that does not want to let go of an idea that I think can help, or people that I think can help. I think oftentimes we've hit obstacles and we stop. And I believe in being absolute doggedly determined. If a thing is a good thing and it should be, I believe in being absolutely doggedly determined to do it. If I see greatness in an employee, I won't stop until I think we can pull it out of them. If I see greatness in the situation, I don't want to stop. I want to be determined. I don't want to throw up your hands and say quit. There's a time and a place to stop. But I think far too often, in order to reach greatness, we think we can get to a place in a short amount of time. There are things that need to be reached in a short amount of time, but to reach a sustained level of a great organization, it takes determination and time.
Now, would your colleagues use this term also?
My colleagues, if you ask them, because they've been asked, they would say servant first, but I'm telling you, yes, they would say determined as well. And matter of fact, probably doggedly so, like, wow, you're not gonna let this go, are you? No.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
First, Dr. Shaw, thank you for being here tonight. I know it has been a very long day since you and Mr. Griffin and I started at 8 o'clock this morning. So,
Yes, sir.
the question I get tonight, the first one is, Florence City Schools represents a very real, rich diversity of students and faculty. How do you believe this impacts student achievement and the student learning environment?
So there's a video out by the name Rita Pierce. And the title of the video is Everybody Deserves a Champion. I couldn't help but think of that video today as I ate dinner with two of the board members, and I had a conversation actually with Ms. Watson about something very similar to this. Kids just basically, they don't learn from people that they don't have a connection with. You know, they don't necessarily have to like you, but they need to respect you and believe that you have something to give them. So when we talk about diversity in our kids, in order to be able to get that connection comes in a lot of ways. Sometimes diversity is about race. But sometimes diversity is about socioeconomics and the way you came up and upbringing. Sometimes diversity is about, hey, you've lived in 2 or 3 places across the country, and so kids can relate you there. Sometimes we have kids that want to go to major league universities or Ivy League universities, and you have teachers who have varying degrees from varying places. So when we talk about diversity, we really talk a lot of things. We talk about race, we talk about socioeconomics, we talk about culture, we talk about where the degree's from, but we also talk about life experiences. I was able to connect with some kids because I spent 8 years working in a factory, and some of the kids could relate to that, and it was good. We've had other people who have, one of our administrators was a former hairdresser, and so some kids can relate to that because of that. You know, some people are chemistry and science phenoms and gurus, and because of that you can connect. You know, but I don't want to skirt the issue of race and gender and those things either. Because you can look up multiple studies. The reality of it is that kids need to look at people and be able to relate to them. And so when I look at that and how it represents student achievement, it is our job to put as close as we can a diverse population in front of our students, whether those be teachers or administrators or staff members. Your lifeblood of your district are your people that you hire. And so those are the lifeblood of our students as well, though.
Thank you.
Dr. Shaw, what is one experience from each role of your educational career that has helped prepare you to become the superintendent of Florence City Schools? And then I'm going to go ahead and put the other one on there.
Okay.
And what has been your most outstanding contribution to education?
So my role of an educational career starts with me as a student. Going all the way back to Fred Hendon and Fred Hendon being my principal and my parents getting a divorce and me not really knowing how to handle that. I learned from that experience that part of an administrator's job is to care about kids. Because I went back to that many days in my mind and thought about how Fred Hendon put his arm around me many days and had just some private conversations with myself. Mm-hmm. Or I think about Greg Reisner reading books to me, and me having a great love for reading when I got older because I thought it was cool that I had a male teacher that read to us all the time, and it was great. Or Dr. Pettis pushing us to do odd things like rappelling and going on camping trips. It taught me that when you're in education or administrative roles, sometimes you need to give kids and adults different kinds of experiences. I learned as a teacher that relationships make or break your connection with kids and their learning. I learned that basically relationships are the gateway to the learning almost, and that even if a kid hated your guts, you need to be able to connect with the student on some level that the student felt like you had something to offer them. I learned as a coach for this experience. I learned from the experience that self-reflection is key to improvement. And so I worked in a place once upon a time that utilized videotaping, and it changed my teaching because I realized that time that how much more kids learn when they can really get a true picture of who they are. So we talk about formative assessment a lot in our district, and we talk about different ways that we help kids know where they are and make the adjustment. I got that piece from coaching because I realized that it made kids go. Assistant principal, I learned management of a facility. I realized real quick that if kids didn't feel safe, and you did not manage a facility, that the situations would absolutely manage you. And I learned communication skills. I learned to communicate with parents. I learned to communicate with the custodians. I learned to communicate with the child nutrition program. I learned to communicate with the AP teacher. I learned to communicate with the angry parent. I learned to communicate with central office. I learned to communicate when the state fire marshal showed up. FBI, you learn to communicate with different levels of people. One of my high school people, yeah. So I did learn to communicate with all different types of people. Federal programs and transportation. I learned that federal programs, a better understanding of budgeting, large sums of money that are earmarked for specific places. I learned that generalities generally don't work in federal programs. That money is earmarked to go to a certain place and for a certain group of kids, and it has a 21-digit code, and you better be sure that it is where it belongs and going for the purpose that it belongs to. I also learned through federal programs how to really reach out to the community, because part of the federal programs when I was there was family outreach, and so we partnered with Shayla Roberts to go to housing authority homes and work with parents about learning better about their kids' test scores, and we partnered with Todd Nix as we did daddy-daughter dances at the Coliseum, and so we just learned community outreach on that one. The transportation piece, I learned about some of our parents have a really hard time getting their kids to school. And I learned the outlay of the city, but the transportation piece, sometimes, man, despite their best efforts, sometimes parents can't get them there. And so that was a hard lesson learned in transportation. I learned as the instructor or the director of instruction and assessment, all about the specificity of data and what scores say about kids. So you have a test score, and it's a test score, but it's a kid. And if you have a collection of test scores on their teacher's name, you have a trend and a skill set. And so I learned sometimes you don't really need to freak out about a test score. You just need to analyze what the kids know and don't know and make the adjustment. And then finally, I've learned as assistant superintendent, my love when I was in the schools, in the classroom, was to put my hands on kids. Like, that was my deal. And so when I moved from the school site to the central office, I hit a real depression almost. I mean, I had a really hard time not being able to touch kids. But I learned through that period of time, all the way through assistant superintendent, that you can touch principals, and principals can touch assistant principals, and they can touch instructional partners, and they can touch teachers, and teachers can touch kids. And I learned that you can still touch kids. You just have to be more strategic about it and more intentional about how you do it. You can still see those results. And how all that really pours into this, or my greatest contribution to education, all of those experiences poured into whether me as a kid being a free and reduced lunch kid, or me as a kid being a middle class kid, the parents got divorced, or me as a person growing up and graduating from Bradshaw High School. All of those pour into creating a learning culture here. It took all of those experiences to prepare me to try to create the learning culture that we have in this district. And so if you ask me my greatest contribution to education, it would be the learning culture that I've tried to build here. And it's not just I, it's we. I'm saying I, but the reality of it is there's a lot of people sitting in this crowd tonight that helped that process. But going back to being determined, this has been my assignment for the past 4 years, and I've worked tirelessly to try to create that. So that what we have done here, what our teachers have done here, our administrators, what the people have done here, that culture of learning is my greatest contribution.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Shaw,
Yes, ma'am.
give you a chance to get some water.
Yes, ma'am.
We currently have a culture of success in our school district. How would you propose to continue and improve this positive environment for students and employees?
So, I've been asked a lot today of how it would be different if I were as superintendent here. And I tell you, in many ways it would be different, but in some ways it would not. The culture that has been set here, we have a real, ferocious attitude about trying to be great. And so I think that expectation stays. The things that we do differ under people, but a mindset, that is invaluable. That's a core value. So I realized a couple of years ago, we had this idea that we wanted to be number one in the state. But what I realized was number one's not a place, it's a mindset. And so you put people in place to try to be the absolute best they can be. So what I will do to continue that is I will continue to hold that expectation high, that we absolutely cannot make excuses about the success of our district, because the success of our district is the success of our kids. So we cannot change that. And honestly, the board absolutely has those same expectations, because you've been here for that journey. We've been a really good school district for a long time. We've been a blue ribbon winning school district for a long time. We have won awards across the school district for a long time. But the attitude about us being one of the top districts in the country and how it impacts kids will absolutely stay. I will absolutely keep that mantra. The expectations is how I will hold that up.
Dr. Shaw, I don't know why they gave me the bullying question, but they did.
Shoe fits.
Bullying is a generational and cultural issue and has been happening since the beginning of time. It is an issue that all school systems deal with in all ages of students. What is your experience in reducing bullying so children feel safe and focused on learning?
So I have, I guess, experience at three levels here. First, I'll go to my years as assistant principal in the district. So I spent 4 years at the high school doing many things, but my primary role at the high school was discipline. That's what I did. And so my experience with reducing bullying there simply was being absolutely visible and being absolutely a communicator. I communicated with students our policy and what was expected of them. I communicated to parents when things were happening with their students, but I kept my door open for students to talk to me and me talk to them. It was not really a magic formula. It was simply kids felt comfortable enough to come to me, to talk to me, to tell me about things, and it helped me prevent. I could be everywhere at one time, partially because people throughout the building were telling me where to be, and they didn't have trouble finding me. So I'm not going to tell you it was perfect in my 4 years at the high school, but I will tell you that the kids understood that my number one goal was everybody in this place deserves an education. And so we're not going to sacrifice education of $9.99 for the education of one. I try to be very fair with it, and it worked for the most part, in my opinion. When I moved to federal programs, of course, I took over district safety, and so the SROs at that time were using the Mendez program, which was primarily for drug abuse, but they also did lessons on bullying. We did them at the high school on down, and so that was effective in some ways. But as money fizzled out, that kind of has fizzled out some. I've seen a resurgence of that this year, where SROs are taking packets and beginning to try to reinstitute that again. And in my current seat, we have had a problem the last couple of years with increased complaints about bullying. And one of the things we've seen the last few years is our kids don't necessarily have the skill set to understand conflict resolution. So in many ways, our students are coming to school and they are using conflict resolution skills that they have learned, not at school. And so we brought in Pete and Charlene Key to basically try to meet with students, a certain group of students in 6th grade up through the high school ranks. And our goal in that was to reduce bullying by giving the kids other options. Because oftentimes we fuss and we punish and we get on the kids about their behavior they have and what causes bullying, but the reality of it is we've never taught them an alternative. We've only told them to stop. And so the goal with the Pete and Charlene Key coming in is to try to give them a skill to be able to have conflict resolution in a way that doesn't require physical attack or bullying. We would like to expand that, because we feel like, our teachers need to understand what we're trying to do with the kids and understand it, and we feel like we can even expand it to community peace with parents. So those are what I've done with bullying on 3 levels.
Thank you.
I want to go just a little bit deeper on that question, and I'm going to put you on the spot, Dr.
Okay.
Shaw. I'm sorry, but
It's fine.
can you specifically give us an idea of if a parent came to you and reported that their child had been bullied constantly, and maybe have talked to the principal and other administrators and nothing had been done, but the parent continues to feel that their child is being bullied, what would be your...
And it has happened. It's happened this year. And so you have to go back to the source. And the reality is the source is at the school. And so you have to sit down and you have to speak with the principals about what has happened. You have to want to see documentation about what has happened. All right, I've been told that this has happened this many times. Can you speak to this to me? And we sit down and try to strategize as leaders. But that is really a hard one. It is, again, don't mind to touching kids. It is easier to address bullying when you're at the spot. Different people have different skill sets. School management was a gift of mine. It was just something I felt good about doing. And so when I sit down with a principal and want to know, usually our principals roll out a long sheet of we did this and we've done this and we've done this. But the reality of it is this: if our community and parents and students feel like we have a bullying problem, we have a bullying problem. And so we're going to have to do something better about communicating what that is and how we're going to address it in order to be able to move past it. But my first is to listen to the parent, take note of the parent, what happened, go investigate with the principal and find out what has happened, and then re-up with the parent, And sometimes, I'll just be honest with you, it's not enough. I'll get another call in a month, or I'll get another call in 2 weeks. And so it's just a constant back and forth trying to make sure that everybody's aware of the kids' needs and what are we doing to try to address those.
Thank you.
One other question on that, Dr. Shaw.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned bringing Pete Key in
Yes,
to
sir.
work with different groups of students.
Yes, sir.
Have you seen success with that?
So they have been tracking data for us. I looked at their mid-year data, and so they work with a group of alternative school students, and so they've been looking at recidivism data for the alternative school students. At mid-year, we had pretty decent data, but I have not looked at the data. We haven't pulled it again till the end of the year. Our principals will be ones to better talk about really how well that has gone for them. When I have spoken with students. I visit students in different venues on my spare time. And so a lot of the times, the students will talk to me about what's happening in school. And so some of it has really helped kids, and some of the kids kind of shrug it off. But the reality of it is the students that I have talked to about it have simply said to me, hey, I never thought about looking at it that way. I never thought about doing it that way. I never had the skill set. Nobody ever taught me to do it that way. All I knew is somebody hit me, I'm gonna hit them back, and it is what it is. They've been talking about me or whatever. And so I will be sure to get the board that data though when we pull it again in May.
Be nice.
That's
Thank you.
good.
You mentioned communication. Back to bullying.
Okay.
How would you open the lines of communication with parents? We know when a parent is upset, they're beating on your door.
Absolutely.
How do you communicate often before an incident?
So we're gonna have to have really public conversation about bullying. Like, I don't think we can address it any other way than having some open conversation with our parents about our like what we do in response to bullying and what they're seeing and how we can come to a middle ground. Like, Pete and Charlene have been our first step in to try to systematically address a bullying behavior, but also I'll tell you, we're going to have more understanding between our school system and our parents about what bullying is and how we're handling it. I'll just be honest with you. I think none of us skirt safety issues as a district. I don't think that's our goals. But I will tell you that this issue is something that I have heard over and over again, and it does go back to simply what culture do we agree that we're going to address as a school district. What are we going to do about it? But I think first we need to get on some communication, even planes, with our community about what is bullying and what does it look like. What do we address versus what does the JPO address, because your kid's been constantly bullied online, or something happened to your child at the skating rink, versus what do we address at school. And I think while we know what rules we operate by, I don't know that as a collective we've really had that conversation with parents. And I'll tell you, I had a conversation with the parent today in the parent meeting, and the parent gave me a scenario. I think it was Justice for Jack. And so Jack is a kid under 10 years old in Great Britain, maybe. And Jack was jumped on and had a head injury. But because the kids who jumped on Jack were under 10 years old, the police really could not address it. And the school was like, we can suspend the kid or whatever, but what do we do? And that led us down a road about bullying. And so this parent's thing was, okay, if bullying is not physical, I have to train my kid to deal with the verbal. He said, but when it gets physical, I expect the school to do something about it. And I could not disagree with him. When it gets physical, we do need to do something about it as a school. But the difference today is our kids are getting bombarded on every turn in their face with verbal jabs with them. Yes, sir. Phones, iPads, Chromebooks, and it's just different. I got bullied when I was growing up. I think we've all experienced it at some point in time. But I didn't have to see it constantly in my face all day, and every time I turn on the device and every night somebody has a comment about it when I get back to school. It's just a different animal. And so I think we have to look at it differently. I really do. That's not to say that I expect the community to be 100% pleased with what we do, but I think we have to start somewhere, and communication with them is that start.
Thank you. I believe the other comments show how important this issue is. It goes to safety, being able to go to school and not be afraid, being able to sit in the classroom and know that learning is happening. Most all of our questions tonight can come back to this. And I think you've heard every board member is very concerned.
Yes, sir.
Number 7, what quantifiable data would you use to demonstrate that this district is progressing?
So, you have your normal data. You have academic growth data, academic achievement data. For us, it's performance series in grades 3 through 8 and 10, and it is ACT data is for 11th grade, and work keys is for 12th grade. And so as you see students learning on a real time place, to me, if the heart of a school is learning, then if you see your kids growing and progressing, then you know in some aspect your school is successful. You can look at our district's college and career ready percentage. 89% of our high school kids this past year were considered college and career ready based on 6 different criteria. So that's an aspect of it. You can look at the percentage of your kids that have scholarships as well as the scholarships amount. I think we topped 14 million at the high school last year on that. I think you can look at a district's finances and see if they've been stable financially for a period of time. I think you can look at a school system's facilities. I think if you look at our facilities, we have phenomenal facilities for any school district in any state around here. I think you can look at their enrollment. Our enrollment has went up, I guess, 6 out of the 7 years, last 7 years. You can look at teachers with advanced degrees. I think There's no question that our advanced degrees have exploded, and that is important because you create stability within your teacher ranks because you don't have as much teacher turnover, and also that knowledge gets poured back into kids. You can look at the niche ranks, which is public opinion on surveys. I think right now we rank 7th in the state as the best school district in the state in niche rankings, and we rank like in the top 5% of school districts in the country. All of those are indicators for what quantifiable data I would use to demonstrate that a school district is progressing. But I go back to the academic data. So the academic data has been split now, and I love the fact that it's been split. Because now our state and our federal government looks at student achievement in 2 ways. They look at achievement, meaning what percentage of your kids are proficient, and they look at growth. We've been on the growth game in this district for quite some time, meaning we talk to our teachers all the time about, hey, wherever the kid is when you get them is wherever they are. Our job is to find out what they need and grow them, and that is a big deal in our district about growing kids. But because we were forward thinking and got a waiver from the Aspire, the State Department doesn't necessarily talk about our data as much. Matter of fact, when you look at all the Aspire data from this past year, we're not including any of the spring data. But I pulled that data because I wanted to know just how well our teachers did compared to other districts. Our teachers have all seen, it's a chart out front out there. It's a colored chart that you can see our achievement and our growth. But I pulled our data. So in mathematics, our 7th grade is top 25 in the state. Our 8th grade is top 25 in the state, or top 20 in the state, and our 10th grade students scored 2nd in the state this year as far as the percentage of kids proficient in mathematics. When you look at our reading, for as much as we have fussed about reading in this district, and I have had conversations about with Bob Rawgood and other people about K&1 reading, our 3rd grade is top 10 in the state in percent proficient in reading. Our 4th grade is top 10 in the state. Our 5th grade is top 15. Our 6th grade is top 25. Our 7th grade is top 15. Our 8th grade is top 15. And our 10th grade is 3rd in the state.
That is awesome. I think that is awesome. That's awesome. From the way that.
I say all that, and I have copies of it if y'all want to see it. I say all that to say this. There are a lot of things that make kids successful, and there are a lot of things that make school districts successful. And I don't have our growth data on there because I couldn't find the other people to compare it to. But I'll say this. For me, growth is more important than achievement. I hang my hat on when we got Johnny in August and when we sent Johnny home in May, did we grow Johnny that year or better than what we should have? But I also know that we get judged in the public by our achievement percentages, and we have been hammered in the paper and in the news media sometimes because our percentages have been low or different. We have tried to do some different things. It has paid off for us. Our teachers have done hard work. So when you ask about a successful district, I want to know if your kids are learning and if you're taking care of them.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was good.
Those of you with your iPhones in your hand may want to start taking some notes with this question because it's lengthy. You'll want to write down food services, extracurricular activities, core academics, community outreach, transportation, fine arts, and vocational training. You got it? It's going to be a test on it.
No.
Okay. In which of the following areas, in order from most from more likely to least likely, would you support budget cuts?
That's a tough question.
In which of the following areas, in order from which most likely to least likely, would you support budget cuts? You got them down, okay? And then we want you to justify the order of your ranking and explain your knowledge of how the budgets in these areas work. Wow.
In 2 minutes.
Or less.
Well, it's a pretty impressive essential list that you have in front of us. In front of me, not them.
Oh, they took notes.
They took notes. when I initially looked at this question, my initial thought was to be very linear and to give you a number 1, a number 2, a number 3, a number 4, a number 5, number 6, and number 7. But the more I dwelled on the question, the more I thought about Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
And so when I look at this question, I know you asked for it from most likely to least likely. May I have permission to do it the opposite way?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So the least likely thing I would cut is I would have a group of 3. And that group of 3 would be food services, transportation, and core academics. And here's why. Going back to what we talked about, kids feeling safe in school and that whole deal. Well, if the true purpose of education in school is to educate students, then core academics absolutely has to be just that, the core. But we're a district that has fluctuated between 59 and 61% free and reduced lunch. So if we can't get them there because of transportation, and if we can't feed them while they're there,
They're not gonna do it.
what difference does that make? So when I look at the core academics, we get that funding from a foundational state grant. So I understand where we get that from and how that works. In our district, we have some extra units that we pay out of local budgets, and that's because our city government is generous to us, and our CFSO does a good job of handling the money, and so we're able to do some extra things. But that core academic piece does come from our state, and we're very appreciative of it. Our food services is financed almost 100% fed. And so when you look at some of our schools, 2 of our schools are right at 90% free and reduced lunch. And so if we don't feed those kids, who will? I mean, you know, and our parents do the best they can do, and I'm not knocking our parents, but when you live in a district that has our demographic, you have to be real about what you're dealing with. And so that's part of that. And then as far as the transportation goes, it comes from OCE funds, which come from the state as well. The state does not really fully fund OCE or other common expenditures. So our transportation, I think, really is only funded at about 75 or 80%. And so while we get a good deal of help with those, to me, those 3 are foundational. The second group will be vocational training, fine arts, and extracurricular. And here's why. We've met a child's needs at the core. We've gotten them to school. We've educated them. We have fed them. Then the next part comes with how we want to help them flourish. Our kids all have gifts. And I had a conversation tonight about, what do we do about the kids that miss the cracks and get left behind? And so that is something we really need to focus on. Like that's heartbreaking to know that we have had kids that we have missed, that nobody really has connected with them. But when you look at that second tier of cuts, the fundamental piece about school is there, but in order to make a kid grow and flourish and learn, hey, some kids, they come to school for extracurricular. That's the reality of it. That's what gets them through. Some students, fine arts are their haven away from haven, and that's how they will make their living at the next level, whether it is playing instruments as band or dance people. But that is us pouring into them, making them who they are. Our vocational training, our district has some great partnerships in vocational training, but the reality of it is some kids, the old saying, the skills to pay the bills. Some students in this district, because of vocational training, have received those skills. I cannot tell you a number of students that have went through the 12 for Life program and have not only learned vocational skills, but learned what it was to work in the real world. So when we talk about the funding of those, we'll start with extracurricular. Some extracurriculars, partially they're funded by the foundation units because there's no coach or no teacher that shouldn't say no. There are very, very few that are not paid educators in our district, and that salary comes out of our foundational units. And so their supplements may come out of some local funding, but some of our sports are kind of have the ability to financially stand alone. So that's how that pay goes. As far as fine arts, again, it comes out of the foundational units, but our district has really kind of been forward thinking. And hey, we want somebody to do watercolor painting for our kids. We have a waiver that says we can bring somebody in that does not necessarily have the degree but has the skill set. Well, the flip side of that is those people are usually really successful, and we don't have to pay them as much money as a foundational unit or the benefits. And so that is some strategic financing that we do there that helps. And as far as vocational training, while that again is foundational units, we do get monies from the federal government about Perkins funds to help pay for those. And of course, the one that I would most likely cut, and I want to say this with a disclaimer, community outreach, but I say it because of this. It is not because community outreach is not super important to me. I just feel like you can have community outreach with sweat equity. It does not take money to reach your hand out to partner with somebody. It does not take much money to sit down with some of the organizations that we've sat down with and had this community outreach. It takes time, it takes effort, but that can be done without as much money as the other one. If there are 2 willing parties or more, you can have community outreach. If you're willing to work late, you can have community outreach. It doesn't take money to do that. It's not that it's not important, because for our district, it is vitally important, but it doesn't take money to do that.
Thank you so much. That was a hard one.
Very interesting.
Get you some more water if you need it. That was a tough answer. That was a tough, long answer.
You need
But,
some more bottles?
I appreciate
I got a couple of
the
more.
candor in the way you answered that one, Dr. Shaw. I
Yes,
really
sir.
did. Our school system has always
I gotta go.
partnered very well with our local government and with local institutions of higher learning, whether it be UNA, Northwest Shoals Community College. How do you plan to maintain and grow these relationships in your role as superintendent of Florence City Schools?
Our mayor made a statement about we've had a lot of leadership change, and it would be good for us to sit down at the table. And I could not agree more. I feel like whoever the new superintendent is.
Would you repeat that, please?
Yes. I said our mayor made the statement in one of our meetings, I cannot remember, that we've had a lot of leadership change. And it would be good for us to sit down and have conversation. And I agree, I really do. As the new superintendent, I would relish the opportunity to have a standing monthly meeting or bi-monthly meeting with President Kitts and UNA and with the mayor. I think it's something special about breathing the same air as a colleague. It's good to have phone conferences, and sometimes time doesn't permit. But I think the reality of it is, in this city, UNA is a major economic driver. Florence City Schools takes care and puts our hands on almost 100% of the kids in this district, and we're a pretty decent economic driver. And then the city is the city itself. I think the importance of the partnerships and relationships with them is absolutely worth me sitting down and spending time having conversation with them. Now, having said that, I understand also as a superintendent, my job is to advocate for my school system and my children, but I don't see those as juxtaposed to one another. It is simply, I want to sit down and see how we can help each other, but at the end of the day, I also need to be sure that I'm trying to take care of 4,500 kids.
Thank you.
Wow. Dr. Shaw?
Yes, ma'am.
It is vital to be in tune with and receptive to your community. How would you communicate with stakeholder groups and encourage their participation in order to make Florence City Schools the best?
Communication is huge. And early on, when I first came to central office, we used to do these community meetings. And I'll be honest with you, I think we would be very wise, especially early on, to try to resume those, whether they're twice a year or quarterly. Just kind of make sure people know where we're going to meet and when we're going to meet, and then allow people to be able to submit questions there, and while they're there, submit questions, and let's answer those questions, and then let's put the answers up for FAQs somewhere so that everybody kind of knows. Because I do think when people send us their children, they send us the best that they have. but oftentimes they work odd hours and can't get there, and they have questions they want to ask. We don't always, I'm a believer in, I may not always give you the answer that you want. The answer I give you might make you downright angry. But the flip side of that is it is my job to have that communication piece with you, and sometimes that works for you and sometimes that works against you, but I don't think you hurt yourself or your district or your students or your teachers by having a scheduled communication with people. The other way is I cannot tell you how many times I've been hit up by this idea about, man, why don't we do a focus group with business and industry? Florence High School, currently Florence High School, Dr. Heiss and Dr. Beal have really been pushing this idea, this thing called launch. And it boils down to sitting down and having conversations with businesses about, we have students that we want to give a skill set to, and we would love to know what skill sets you'd like them to have so we can make this partnership work. And so for me, I think it would be very wise and incumbent upon us to sit down and have a couple of focus group conversations with business and industry about what's coming. I know school systems, generally speaking, can't change as quickly or as rapidly, all right? But I also know that if we can sit down and have a conversation with a group of business leaders, that probably we can look at what we're offering career tech or offering curriculum-wise and see if we can make some adjustments. The reality of it is school is a learning place, but parents want their kids to be able to have life opportunities afterwards. And so if we can sit down with a business owner and say, hey, I need some maintenance guys, and can you tweak something in career tech? Well, that takes teacher units, and that's really hard, but let's see what we can do. Can we get you some kids with partnerships that you can train them up? And so I'd like to have a couple focus groups. And finally, one of the things I would love to do, I will give Ms. Dale credit for this. Ms. Dale has been on me forever about shooting short video snippets of myself. This kind of started when we did the questions for the new teachers, if y'all remember, that we sent out, answering questions they don't know. But it kind of clicked something in all of our brains about what's the harm in, I call like a weekly 120. And it's just a 2 minutes, 120 seconds about one area or one piece that's going on. And it just allows you to have a constant connection, and then people to have a place or a source to be able to get some information. And while I know that sounds like a lot, the reality of it is, with technology today, it won't take much to sit down and do a weekly 120. It may take somebody a little bit to do some editing, but
dovetailing off that idea,
okay.
How do you ensure it gets out to the people that we're really trying to impact, and we want to see that 120-second video?
Yeah, so that's a great question as far as technology goes, and it really is. So I'll go back to my early days as an admin, and Dr. Shepard gave me this email list of 300 plus names, and I asked him what was the purpose of them, and he says, well, this is how I communicate with my people. He said, I send this email out. And so somebody said to me once, what do y'all do for the people who don't have electronics and emails? And I said, I don't know. I hadn't really came across that. So I asked a parent one time who said they didn't receive some information via email. And I asked, well, how can we help? And the parent said, well, the reality of it is, if you would do a call out sometime to let me know what's going on, I can find somebody with a device to see it. But I think you have to open the floodgates of communications all the way that you can. If people know it's there, oftentimes they can find it. The problem is if they don't know that it's there.
That's good. I think you might have answered it, because I just kind of, when you were talking about it, I'm like, man, I think that was the question I was wondering, because my follow-up was going to be the technique of forming partnerships, and you mentioned about getting with the business people and being able to shoot the 120. Is that kind of how you was?
Well, so the 120 to me is just about general information.
Okay. So,
hey, listen, the week's going. Here's something that's popped up in the district we just kind of want you to know about. Sometimes it'll be feel good. Sometimes it's really pertinent information. Hey, parents, report cards coming out. That type of pertinent information. The deal with the business leaders is really a sit down to see, hey, okay, so I don't want to sound anti-intellectual, But the purpose of getting education is in some form or respect so that you can become a productive citizen in our country. Well, if Southwire for me has kind of opened my eyes to the idea that, okay, so we can have a group of kids that can learn a skill, and while we want them to go to college, that's not really my goal. My goal is to really make sure they have the option to go to college, that they are prepared if they would like to go to college. But if they also have the option to go and have a decent paying wage job and have a skill set that's marketable, that's okay with me too. And so if we have a business that can teach our kids a very viable skill, but we have made sure that they have the option to go to college, then I'm all for that.
Yeah. Thank you.
One other follow-up on that line. It goes back to being in tune and receptive to our community.
Mhm.
How accessible does a superintendent need to be to the community and to the stakeholders?
That's a good question.
Well, I have watched my predecessor, and I've watched the job absolutely consume time. I had a small sliver of this as the AP at the high school when I was doing a lot of operations there. The reality of it is this: the job requires a ton of communication. It's the job. I'd like to tell you that I wish it wasn't as demanding, but it's the job. And so you kind of have to know that going in. You know, well, there'll be times I will get some sleep. Absolutely. There are times I will, see my children. Absolutely. But I understand full well that it's the job.
Which means you would be accessible whenever the community needed you, right?
Well, we want to be clear and define that. If you call me at 2 in the morning, I'm not going to be accessible. I mean, if you call me and I'm at a parent conference with my child, I'm not going to be accessible. But like text messages and phone messages and all those pieces, if people can't get you now, don't worry, they'll keep trying. So I get at some point in time, I'm going to have to get back to them. If you're worried about not being able to get me for 2 days, don't worry about that. That's not my nature. You can go back and ask any place I've ever worked or coached or taught, or you can ask people in this district. You can get me. You will hear from me within 12 to 24 hours. That's just the reality of it. Even if it's, hey, I don't know, I'll get back to you.
That's an honest question.
Nothing wrong with an I don't know.
That's right. Honest answer.
And we're so close to the end. Saving the best for last, but I'm the next best to last. What are your plans to ensure that academics, the arts, and athletics all function at a high level of achievement simultaneously in order to serve the needs of all students?
So I've said earlier today that your people are your lifeblood of your district, and they just are. So when we talk about academics and the arts and athletics all flourishing at a high level of achievement simultaneously, it is really about the people that you have in place. You want to hire people that have a passion for what they do. You want to hire people that feel called for what they do. I don't have an issue with people who are simply employed and want a job to do what they do. But the reality of it is they need to understand that the expectations for the employed one and the called one are the same. And generally speaking, people who are employed don't want to do that. So the first thing you want to put in place are people with the passion. And then you have a district vision that you get those people with the passion for athletics or the passion for the arts or the passion for academics to plug in, and we all have that one vision. So a vision for greatness may look different in the arts, but it is great for the student nonetheless. And then what you do from that point is you create the process. What is the plan and the process in which you're going to use to get us to that place? And I really believe in tangible, what are we going to do and what are we going to do next, types of plans, really measurable pieces, and then they self-assess and we evaluate from our end. And then we have to sit down and talk about that and make adjustments. I think sometimes we get caught up on what we feel. I feel like they're not doing a good job, or I feel like they are doing a good job, or I don't like this, or I don't like that. I can use our school data as prime example. When I look at our school data and you see a certain percentage of kids is proficient, I am wrecked over it. But then I turn around and look at what the rest of the state is, and I'm thinking, wow, we're not bad. But I think sometimes we have to get a real perspective on those people. So you have your people, you have your vision, you have your process, then you have your reflection and your adjustments. And at the end of the day, it's about the adjustments. Are we willing to make the adjustments? And that's the tough part of the job. Is anybody willing to make the adjustment for what, not what you like, but for what works?
Last one, Dr. Shaw.
Yes, sir.
Maybe.
Yes, sir.
It is our goal to continue to have an open and transparent relationship between the superintendent and the board. How would you ensure this continuation? And let me add a little bit to this question. In my prior tenure on the board, I experienced that, and it's very important, and it's very beneficial not only to the board but to the students and the administrations of all the schools, that the superintendent and the board work together, not against each other, work together.
Yes, sir.
How would you ensure that?
So it seems like communication is the mantra of the night, but that is exactly what it has to be. I'll be honest with you, I'll absolutely lean on you all as for what you like, but just in my head, I'm thinking initially, weekly emails about what's going on in the district, just kind of giving you updates about that, try to be proactive with phone calls and try to let things not blindside you. I always appreciate that when I'm in leadership. I think work sessions are key to talk about what's going on, but the flip side of it is as superintendent, I would need feedback from what works for you. Do emails work for you? Do phone calls work for you? But I just think it is a communication piece about, basically at the end of the day, you have 6 bosses. So, what works for you communication-wise?
I realize there's a difference in necessary communication and bugging you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And that's something that we, as a board, and you as a superintendent, would have to work out.
Yes, sir.
Do you think that's the way it should be?
Absolutely.
Yes, would you feel comfortable with this board or with any member of this board to say, hey, that's a little too much. We don't need to communicate every day about that particular subject. Would you feel comfortable with saying that to a member of the board?
Here's what I'll say to that question, Mr. Howard. If you deem me worthy of this job, then that conversation probably does have to happen. I don't mind being asked a question. I don't mind being asked a follow-up. But I also understand that there comes a point in time where, do you trust me to get the job done or not?
Exactly.
And so that is really at your discretion. Whoever you hire, that's at your discretion. But I make no bones about that. I don't need you to call me 5 times for something, But the reality of it is, I get it. I get pressing issues. What I'll tell y'all is, and this is no disrespect to you, but nobody's going to worry and take to heart the well-being of this school district in this room more than me if I have that job. Because it is the job becomes you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else?
I just have to ask one question. You're a secondary major.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm an elementary major.
Yes, ma'am.
Convince me that you understand elementary child growth and development.
So
3 times. You know what I mean.
2011, in this boardroom, one of my great friends was named the principal of Florence High School. and that stung, but I was happy for her, and I was happy for Florence High School because she's a great leader. A couple months later, I had the opportunity to take a job as a federal programs director, and my first meeting was a meeting in which I began to go over the table to have a really close discussion with Rose McGee, because Rose and I got into a secondary elementary disagreement about curriculum. But from that butting those heads, Rose took to tutoring me and increasing my knowledge about elementary education, and it really was a great marriage. And then I began to work through the budgets of the federal programs that year, and we had 3 great principals. Dr. Chris Restbrook was one of those principals at the time. Miss Ann Bill was a principal at that time, and Dr. Shirley Coker was a principal at that time. And so, needless to say, I had a really quick education about money, their money, our money, and the purposes of that money. And I learned real quick about summer school and intervention. I learned real quick about Title I and what that was about. So I had a 2-year course from 4 phenomenal elementary educational leaders. And so I would tell you that I feel really comfortable in an elementary setting. I do. I will tell you, secondary is absolutely my wheelhouse, but I can make it just fine in the elementary place.
Very good.
Do you have any questions for us?
I wish I could tell you that I did, but I really do not, other than have you all decided on a date that you might make a decision.
ASAP.
We have a work session scheduled for the 20th.
Yes.
That's
Thursday
a week
night.
from today?
A week from today.
A week from today, we have a work session scheduled. We'll see if we have one or more than one.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask one more question?
Certainly.
Dr. Shaw,
Yes, sir.
as a superintendent, or even as your experience as an assistant principal,
Yes,
I think
sir.
this would go back to that as well.
Yes, sir.
Do you see your role is to make sure with the people who serve under you that you've empowered them, trained them, helped them to where they can go elsewhere and succeed, or follow you into your position?
So one of the great attributes about a servant leader is the idea, there's a quote in Greenleaf's book about, do the people that you serve become more autonomous? Do they become empowered and more likely to lead themselves? That is at the core of what a servant leader does. You hope you raise up and empower one, because the reality of it is you get the opportunity to touch another one. Mm-hmm. And so that is absolutely our roles. I've worked for people who have strongly discouraged me from leaving, and I've worked for people who have equipped me in every way to go on to the next level. And I know how I felt in that. And all I can say is that everybody in this room that's an educator is an adult that has a life path of their own. My job is to equip them where they are right now, and if their path is to go somewhere else, Godspeed.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank each and every one of you for coming. We're going to do this 3 more times. And you're welcome to come back Friday night. And whenever we set that day, someone on this panel went, "We're working Friday night." Yes, we are. Monday night and Tuesday night. And I hope on the 20th the charge is to select someone, and we hope that we can do it that night. I've enjoyed this time together.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy this board and how we work together as one. Hope to see you tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. You're dismissed.